up a dive. Feel the vibe, get ready to ignite. Untold stories in the airways, flying through the night. Experience voices, tales so bold. Streaming live, the truth unfolds. Untold Radio Network, where secrets come alive. New episodes daily, the mysteries thrive. Great guests, super chat, so I remember I share and subscribe. Join the side where truth can't hide. Aliens in the attic, UFOs in the sky. Cryptids lurking, oh my, oh my. Ghosts in the hallway, whispering your name. The paranormal, the unexplained. Become a VIP, get the inside scoop. Unlock the mysteries, be part of the group. Live streaming stories, they're talking to you. Super chats buzzing, join the crew. Untold Radio Network, where secrets come alive. New episodes daily, the mysteries thrive. Great guests, super chat, it's a wild member ride. Share and subscribe, join the side where truth can hide. So if you've got the guts and you want to explore, tune into the Untold, it's what you're looking for. From aliens to ghosts and all that's unseen. Untold Radio Network, where the world's mysteries convene.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Paranormal Spectrum right here live on the Untold Radio Network. Thank you all for tuning in. Today we had some time zone and clerical error issues, and we are all set here at Eastern Time at noon, and we are set for a great show. I am so excited to have my guest on today. When I started this podcast and pitched it to Doug here on the network, he was one of the first guys that I knew I wanted to talk to. So I'm super excited for today's show. Before we get to him, guys, tomorrow is National Paranormal Day. Super excited for that as well, for anybody that celebrates that. If you are in Wisconsin and in the southern part, come on out to the Broadhead Library. I will be doing a presentation on exploring the paranormal tomorrow, May 3rd at 5:30 p.m. So if you guys are in the area, come out and check it out. It is free. May 18th, we are going to be in Rhinelander, Wisconsin for the Hodag Heritage Festival. That is going to be in Rhinelander, Wisconsin. And then, of course, guys, June 1st, we are coming to you from the Marinette Menominee Bigfoot and Paranormal Convention. We have Chad Lewis, Doug Hychek, Rich Daniels, and myself doing presentations, and Angela Zabel will be doing a psychic gallery reading that evening. May 31st, myself and Rich Daniels will also be leading a Bigfoot hike out into the woods of the Hayden Adventure property. And if you want to go further south, on June 8th, the following weekend, we will be down in Chicago at the Chicago Paranormal Convention. So all kinds of cool stuff coming up. Guys, if you want to show your support for all things here on the Untold Radio Network, here's how.
Show your support for the Untold Radio Network family of shows and join in on the conversation by using super stickers and super chats on YouTube. Got a question you want answered? Ask it live via a super chat and get real-time responses from our show's knowledgeable hosts and guests. Help keep the Untold Radio Network shows running strong. We need your support. Send your super chats and stickers now.
And I want to thank you, Charles, our brand new Super Chats member. Thank you so much. It helps our network and keeps all the great shows here running. So thank you guys for being a part of the network. All right, guys, I am super excited, as I said, for our guests. So I want to get right into it. Here we go. All right, guys, today's guest is Christopher Duncan. He is a recognized figure in remote viewing and the scientific community. After working for the federal government for over 15 years, Christopher has left to pursue scientific research into the phenomena of remote viewing and the occult. Since leaving, he has become a chief engineer at a major defense contractor, published 2 papers on abnormal and under-researched behaviors of low frequencies in the magnetic field. He has appeared on The Tom Green Show as well as Expedition Bigfoot, using both scientific equipment and remote viewing to help the team. And now, ladies and gentlemen, he is here with us. Please welcome to the show, Christopher Duncan. Welcome to the show, man.
Thank you. And apologize to everyone for the mix-up on times. That was kind of on both of us.
Yeah, a little bit on both ways. I was too late and he was too early, and we're all here now, and it's going to be a great show, man. I am super excited to have you on. I got to talk to you and take your class at Phenomenon a couple years ago, and I've been playing with the remote viewing and stuff ever since, and it's been a lot of fun. So,
how's that been working out for you?
Pretty good. I for a while I was working with one of my coworkers, and we were doing 1 or 2 a night at work together. And I actually got one spot on the location. It was Egypt, and I was pretty proud of that. Knocked his socks off. He couldn't even believe that I came up with it. But the rest of them were pretty hazy and pretty blurry. But
yeah, there's I don't know. There's something about that 1 or 2 your first couple times where you get them spot on. It's like a drug. You're just hooked immediately.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a blast. I think today, let's start out with a basic understanding for everybody. Can you explain what remote viewing is?
Yeah, good question, because there's a lot of confusion, and if you look on, if you go to a Reddit for it or something like that, there's a whole lot of things that aren't remote viewing. And I talk about remote viewing from the core of what the research was and things like that. And it's basically the ability to perceive real-time events or things going on in another location. So while you're here, it is not like an astral projection or leaving your body. It's not dreaming about something or being somewhere else or a voice or anything like that. It's literally a scientific method of putting pen to paper or something similar and connecting with something and figuring out what's going on somewhere else, or what is in the envelope, or what is in the box, or something like that. So it's basically remote viewing of a location or time.
Very good. Yeah, you're absolutely right. You look up some of the not research, some of the just put it into Google and look up remote viewing, and it lumps it in with ESP and telekinesis and all this other stuff, and it's not that. It is not any of that stuff.
Yeah, and it's not to say that that stuff doesn't exist, but that's not my expertise at all. I can't even comment on it. It's that's just on its own shelf, and this is remote viewing has its own spot on the shelf.
Absolutely. We already have questions for you. I'm so excited. Lee would like to know, she has done astral travel and she got the smell of a skunk. And she wants to know, when you do remote viewing, do you ever get a smell associated with it?
Yes, I have. The probably most profound one was it was a target that was the detonation of the first nuclear bomb, that site, the Trinity site. And I got the smell of blood and iron in my nose, and because it was the picture was while it was detonating. And so I physically got the impression of sand and wind being blown across my face and some type of energy. but I had this smell of dust and blood and iron, like almost as if I was standing up watching it, and it kind of hit. Um, More often than not, I get like a sound. Water for me is very easy because I'll start to hear like water like lapping against the rocks, like you would hear at a
Mhm.
creek or something.
Interesting. So, now okay, now let's back up. What got you into the whole phenomenon of remote viewing? Because I feel like it's not something that, like, the average person just is like, "I'm gonna study that."
Yeah, very weird coincidence. Or if you call it that. But I was still in my government career. I was working at a small office in Arlington, and I just shown up there as a new employee, and I had an assistant, older gentleman, and who I will just leave unnamed because I don't even know if he's okay with it. But he was a great guy. We worked together for probably 3 or 4 months, and then I started a PhD program on um, basically magnetic fields at low frequencies, uh, and was doing some research on it, antenna construction. And one day he just said, "That's really interesting because that's something we explored in the old remote viewing phenomena." And I was like, "What are you talking about? Like remote viewing?" I was familiar with remote sensing, which is actually like bouncing waves off something to figure out what's going on.
Mhm,
Um, and I had him explain it to me, and it turned out he had worked in those old programs when he was a federal employee, and now had retired, and then was um, contracted to work for the federal government. Not in that capacity; he had just done it at one point, and I was kind of blown away by it. And I said, "That's interesting. I want to try it sometime, but I want you to surprise me. I don't want any setups. Like I want this to be very clean, and I want it to just be surprise and unquestionably not influenced." And a few weeks later, he walked into my office, said, "Are you ready to go?" And he walked me through it. And that first one, I just nailed it out of the park. It was the first target was Niagara Falls, and I kept seeing like a dam, but I knew there was water and water flowing, like it was a dam with the gates open, flooding. And oddly enough, I also picked up like there's something hidden around the water, like maybe behind it or something. And there's people here, and I see like a white steam or fog. And what he didn't know, and what I didn't know, is that it's not hidden per se, but like under the falls, there's actually a power station kind of
mhm.
thing. And I had picked up on that and kind of described it. So described something he didn't know was there, or I didn't know was there as well. And ever since then, I was just like, holy crap! Like I want one a day, every day, and just work through it from there.
Wow. Now you kinda touched on this there, like, so there was actually, like, a military program that was studying remote viewing, and this has been declassified and stuff, and
Yeah.
so can you talk a little bit about the program, what's available and stuff on that, and what happened with it?
Uh, yeah. So the I have some more of the history having been in the government, able to ask people, but on a totally unclassified side, I will just say up front, it is completely released. You download it from government sites. This isn't a guy photoshopping something and putting it on Reddit and saying, "I have this government document." Like you download the files from the government.
Mhm,
And the CIA actually had a frequently asked questions once, and one of the questions was, "Did you guys really study remote viewing?" And the answer that they posted was, "Yes, it works, but it's not very good in our field," kind of thing.
mhm,
Um, but yeah, so it started with, I believe it was the army first. So a Russian defector told the government that the Russians were doing this. Um, and they got interested into it, and I believe they kind of pushed it to the army first, and they stood up this program. Uh, they had many of them when you look through those files. There was one called Gondola Wish, Grill Flame, and there a bunch of them studying different pieces of it. And for a while, it stayed with the Department of Defense and the other services. Then it got wrapped into, I believe, the CIA first. They studied it for a while with some research going on at Stanford Research Institute. It went on for several years, and then they pushed it back down to the Defense Intelligence Agency. And then at some point, uh, funding was, as far as we know, funding was cut from it when the CIA picked it up again and said, "We're done with this. Like, it's over. We did this." What I have from sources is that not all the information was released. The good stuff was left in box and not to be released, and rumors that it might be going on somewhere much, deeper buried into the government. But that's speculation on my part. But yeah, so it kind of went through the up and down cycle of government procurement and funding of research and stuff, and eventually, as things came out in the news, it's really hard to justify and explain. So public pressure kind of, they called it the giggle factor. People were laughing at it, thinking it's like a waste of money. So it kind of became under pressure, and they just kind of wrapped it up.
Very interesting. Now, when you talk about the fact that it's unreliable and that's why they stopped funding it, it's unreliable to the effect of the details, right? Like, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So one thing you need in the intelligence community is very powerful verification. You can't just blindly see or guess something and then take national level action on. For example, if you were using it to determine a target to drop a bomb on, you would want more than just a remote viewer's sketch before you target it to drop a bomb or for whatever kind of activity. Um, and it's great for getting that information, but if you can't validate it, then it's kind of, to this community, it kind of doesn't matter. I can draw what's going on in a hangar across the world, but if no one else can verify it or get in, then it doesn't matter. And in that community, if you can get somebody in to validate it and verify it, then you don't need the remote viewing in the first place, kind of thing. So it becomes a catch-22 for that specific community where you're making national, like presidential level decisions on what you come back with.
Absolutely.
Not something where you can just, oh, okay, I think that's right.
Like I said, I took your class and stuff at Phenomicon, and I remember all this stuff, and it's super fascinating to me, and I know a lot of my audience as well. And I want to make sure that we get all this stuff in because it provides that background to say, it was studied, it was researched, and this is why, things happen and why it isn't studied anymore, or maybe studied in a different realm. But absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, and it's funny because a lot of those studies and verifications that they did, if you read the first couple pages, it will say, "Yep, we studied it. It didn't look good." But then you go 2 or 3 pages in, and it's like, didn't look good, but it really performed well. Like it seems like a lot of people miss the next handful of
Mhm.
paragraphs or pages where they say, "Yeah, this is a real thing. It just doesn't apply well in this setting," kind of thing.
Yeah, I actually have a copy of that declassified paper somewhere in the stack over here. But so yeah, it's really interesting stuff.
Yeah.
So leading on from that, like you talked a little about, the low frequencies and stuff like that. So how does that tie in with the remote viewing?
Whether it ties in or not is a guess, but studying what I've studied, which is very low frequency, it's, well, first of all, so low frequency, like like the power in our homes is all running at 60 hertz. Below that, there are some physics constraints on studying it, and it's kind of been a place that's been left alone for a lot of things. Like we know that there's some submarine communication going on at low frequencies and stuff like that. But for the most part, very quiet and very low frequency is just left alone. It's very hard. There's antenna size requirements. If you were going to try to pick up a standard 1 hertz frequency, you would basically need an antenna that is almost like to the moon or further. That's kind of in that kind of length and range. It's really not feasible. I, as part of my PhD program, have developed a method for doing it with a much smaller size, like one that I can carry. It's a box, and so I started studying that, and there's a lot of phenomenology that goes on that is not 100% explainable yet. Like the first paper I published was picking up what's going on inside an RF sealed room outside of it using very low frequencies. Um, so that tells you that those sealed rooms aren't actually sealed. There's stuff that can pass through it. And the brain operates at some of these very low frequencies. The human body operates, even the signals from your brain telling your heart to beat every quarter of a second or what second or whatever your heart rate is. um, those are like 7 hertz and below. So it would make sense to me that theoretically the brain, anything that's a transmitter is also an antenna. It would make sense that your brain's a bit of an antenna, and it's a matter of tuning in on the right frequency of what's going on. So, for example, if you know what's in an envelope, and I'm here, and if I can tune into the right frequency, there's a chance that maybe I'm picking it up from you, or somebody else who in the world somewhere has perceived what's in that envelope. Um, it's That's strictly theoretical from my part. That's something I think, because those things frequencies pass through a lot. They pass through the earth itself. They pass through salt water, boxes, all those kinds of things. Either that, or there's some other, we'll call it spectrum, that we don't know about. Like, we have, not to get too scientific, but we have the E field, which is your standard RF. We've got the H and B, which are magnetic. Maybe there's a Z field we don't know about. That's just another axis of that we all kind of perceive.
So yeah, we're on the paranormal spectrum right now. So this is all amazing stuff. Yeah. But so when you're looking at the visual light spectrum is the same as your frequencies and all that, correct? So yep. When you have the higher a vibration, the more it can penetrate. You have your X-rays and your gamma rays and all that up on the higher end. So to my understanding, though, your lower frequencies have harder time penetrating. So how are you getting your extremely low frequencies to penetrate into rooms? Can you explain that?
Well, so you're sort of right. That's correct on a very general basis, but these frequencies, they all have their own sort of flavor. Now we're getting into the field of remote sensing, which is a very scientific process of, like, you can have a satellite in the air and it shoots out a signal, and I don't have the signals off the top of my head, but let's say X band, very high frequency. And we have a profile that we know that X band will bounce off oak trees, but will not bounce off pine trees. And then it bounces back and collects, and you can blast that over the earth and say, okay, here's all the oak trees that we know about, and then start doing measurements and say, there's 10,000 oak trees here. So some things it will penetrate through, some things it won't. With low frequency, it tends to penetrate through man-made things more. I need to make sure I get this correct. Low frequency tends to be affected by solar activity and things like that, but can pass through clouds and weather. And high frequency is very affected by clouds and weather, but is not affected by atmospheric effects, is a good example. So it's to be 100% accurate, you really have to measure down to the frequency. Like, what can 6 hertz specifically pass through, or partially pass through? This is a whole, we can do the whole podcast on this. I love this topic, but I don't want to get way too down in the details unless you want me to.
Hey, we can go wherever you want. I'm learning here, so I'm enjoying this.
Yeah. So there's really only 3 states of activity for it. There's transmission, which is pass through. So think of a window in visual light. A window transmits, not transmits like applies power, but lets it through. There's absorption, which is it sucks it up, and then there's blocking or reflectance. And every frequency does some combination somewhere of all of those to different material in different ways. Theoretically, if you take any material and you get it to the right temperature, whether it's very cold or very hot, any frequency can pass through it. It just depends on the frequency and what temperature they require to pass through. So it's very, very complicated and very interesting to talk. Like, it'd be really interesting if you could shoot a laser at a wall, heat or cool it enough to cause light to pass through, or something like radar, and then image what's going on. In the split second, it's able to be transferred through. Those kinds of questions are what I spend my time thinking about.
I'm very excited. Have you? Ooh, okay. Here's a question for you. We're just bouncing back and forth here. Have you ever been seen while remote viewing?
I don't think so. I don't think I've ever been perceived as, and by my only strict definition, I don't go anywhere. I'm just sort of receiving it in my head. But I've never had a remote viewing where I'm reviewing something and got the idea that somebody knew I was viewing it. It would be interesting. I did see a reflection once. I didn't know what it was. I had a very difficult target, and I kept seeing like a face like mine looking back at me. And I was wondering, like, it confused me, completely confused me. Well, the target turned out to be the bean in Chicago, the mirrored bean. And so I very probably was seeing my own reflection.
Interesting. I think that question kind of goes along with you brought up the theory that you're could be reading somebody else's mind about the target. So in that case, would the person's mind that you're reading sense your mind touching theirs, or any kind of stuff like that?
It theoretically could. I won't say no because there's just so much out there you just don't know. Like realistically, it's hard to say yes or no, but I have a feeling if we started testing on it, it's hard to quantify. But I mean, it's an interesting question. Like that'd be something we're studying.
I vaguely remember you talking about something as well about like the target being in one room and somebody knowing what it was, and you reading the person who knew what it was instead of the target.
Yeah, I did find in some of my tests that my accuracy went way up when the person in the room with me um, knew what the target was. Not to say I wasn't accurate when they didn't, but it went like on the order of going from 60% hits to 80% when they knew and weren't telling me. And I almost always did those with my back turned to the person. Like I try to control myself and either turn my back or never make eye contact with them, tell them don't talk to me, stuff like that, to make sure I'm not like reading body language. Um, but just them sitting in the room seemed to, a 20% improvement on what I was reading in accuracy.
Interesting. Before we go any further, I want to know, I was trying to find like if you had a website. The only thing I could find you on was Instagram. So if you have any other links, I'd love to share them and put them into show notes or whatever. But do you teach? I know you did the classes at the convention stuff, but do you teach remote viewing publicly still, or is there any way that people can get a hold of you if they would?
Instagram is the best. I don't really have a personal website. I teach on a we'll call it by exception basis. So if someone approaches me the right way and they really just want to learn, and I just sometimes it's very intangible, just feel right about it, then I'll do it. Otherwise, I found that I will get very bogged down. Like the demand is there. I try not to. This is for some reason I feel strongly about trying not to make money. Like my job is not to get rich off teaching people remote viewing. At the same time, I like to have some compensation for my time. So I try to draw that. I get very tied up emotionally into that. Like, am I charging this person too much? Is that unfair? And back and forth. And it's just a lot less. It's also very tiring. I don't know if you experienced it in your tests, but if I do like 2 or 3 a day, I get actually very exhausted. So I value and protect my time, but at the same time, if someone approaches me and they seem to be for the right reasons and I feel right about it, I'll teach them.
Very good. Do you have any advice for people that may have already taken some classes or researched it on their own?
Yeah, don't stop and really bring out your inner skeptic and scientist versus the other end of the spectrum, whatever you want to call that. Only because you will find that it will validate what you're looking for. Like if you're looking for a mystery that works, a lot of people and I don't even need to say that this is a spectrum, but just for the simplicity of explanation, there's the heavily scientific that never think outside the box on one end, and the people that are all the way outside the box on the other. I don't really have an opinion on either one. It's great to be either one. But if you lean into that scientific side and still work on this, it will give you what you're looking for on the other side. Like you will find that mystery, like, holy crap. Like one, this is I can validate this. I can see it. But two, no one knows how this works. And this is just crazy. And it's awesome kind of thing. So yeah, be a skeptic, be a very heavy skeptic, and it will work.
Very good. We have to take a really quick break for station identification. We are talking with Christopher Duncan. He is a remote viewer and all kinds of other cool stuff. And if you guys have any questions, put them in the comments section. We'll get to them right after this quick break.
Hey, Untold Radio Network fans. Want exclusive perks and to support our channel? Introducing our YouTube membership program with 3 amazing levels. Get loyalty badges that level up to different cryptids the longer you're a supporter. How cool is that? You'll also get access to custom Bigfoot emojis and priority in chat. Upgrade to Backstage Pass for exclusive wallpapers, photos, status updates, discounted books, and merchandise. Go all in with the producer level for everything mentioned plus member shoutouts. Ready for an enhanced experience? Join now, pick your membership level, and let's make this journey even more exciting together.
All right, we are back here live on the Untold Radio Network. Keep that in mind, guys. If you have any questions, throw them in the comments section, and we'll get to them as soon as we can. We got to talk about Expedition Bigfoot. I know that this is my paranormal show, and I wanted this because I got tired of talking just about Bigfoot, but we got to talk about Expedition Bigfoot. So there's a couple things I wanted to bring up about that show. And first of all, how did they just decide that they wanted to have a remote viewer come in, and how did that happen? How were you brought in to hunt Bigfoot?
Depends on how far you want to go back on this. This is a deep root, but it all started. I was working, so I live in Northern Virginia, and I was working in Los Angeles, so I was commuting back and forth every, like, going out there and staying 3 weeks at a time, and then coming home and then coming back. But essentially, what happened is I got to know Tom Green, who was, from my generation. He was like a childhood idol of mine. Like, some of those shenanigans, I was like, holy crap, these are genius. And got to know him, who happened to know somebody on the show. And he got to know, like, my scientific research, asked if I want to be on the show. Sure, no problem, whatever. I was like, I don't even need to be paid. It's an awesome opportunity. He did that. But then I became friends with the people on the show, and some of them are a little more on this end of the spectrum, where they, less scientific. And as I was explaining to them, they all got interested in this. But then with Ronnie and Russ, I actually demonstrated remote viewing, not recording, just showed it to them, and their jaws dropped. Just like, holy crap. Like, that whole, well, then they invited me on the show, and of course I did it. And by the way, to everyone watching, they cut out so much of the good from that show, from the remote viewing part. Like, I have a feeling it was cut out because it would have become the focal point for the show, like the remote viewing versus the Bigfoot thing. But they brought me on the show, and it just kind of went from there. One thing they cut out was, and so I will also say, a lot of people are skeptics about the show. All the producers are in on it, but I saw nothing like that at all in the recording. I didn't see any, because you're not just out there for your quick segment. You're out there for the whole episode, maybe 2, with them. I didn't see anything that was pre-planned, no planted evidence, no nothing. Closest at all I saw was they found something really cool, and then, oh, hold on, let's re-record that, but instead, like, your reaction. But the find was a legit. One thing they had me do was, and I didn't know they were going to do this, they had Russ pick a location and had me remote view it. And it turned out I nailed it, like, perfectly, his vacation home in the Northwest, and described the circumstances around what it looked like when he bought it and things like that, and even the color and the background, like the trees and stuff. And from there, it just became a thing. Like, it just, I was on the show and did a whole bunch of remote viewing that night. What I ended up doing was laying out essentially a path for where they would go without knowing it. I was like, this is not going well. I'm not performing well. Not getting a lot of hits. I'm getting hits, but they don't make any sense. And then they came back later and told me, like, well, what you actually did was you made a list of all the things we were going to see throughout the night, and they all happened. So it was pretty good. Every now and then I still get contacted, what would you think about one more? Like, anytime. You don't have to ask. You just call and tell me where to be, and I'll be there. So it might not be the end of it.
Very cool. Have you gotten a chance to do any other like cryptid hunting or Bigfooting or any of that for anybody else, or has anybody else ever asked you to look for any of that stuff?
It's always close. Like, I get a lot of, Hollywood is a very fickle industry, I'm finding. On one hand, it's not my, like, I don't have a set goal or dream to be in Hollywood. Like, there's no part of me that's going and trying out shows. If it came, I would allow it and welcome it, but it's not something I'm pursuing. I've been approached about having my own show a couple times and gone so far as, why don't we develop a pitch deck? And then things just kind of, either through my fault or theirs, just fall off and it kind of goes away. Or let's have you out on the show. Okay, just tell me when. And then it just kind of stops. And the way I've learned with Hollywood is it falls off, just let it fall, and they'll circle back around. It might be a year, it might be 2 years. They come back around. Hey, where you been, buddy? Let's do this kind of thing. So there's room for more. I'm just very much more action oriented. Like if somebody says, "Do you want to be on a show?" I'm like, "Yep, let's do it right now. Let's log in." And so we'll see. We'll see. I've been approached, but I'm willing and able, just if somebody wants it.
Very cool. My second question then about Expedition Bigfoot is we were talking about the low frequencies and the energy frequencies and stuff like that. Have you watched the show? Are you familiar with I think it was the season you were in or the one before it, where they used this supposedly new government technology to scan down a valley and identify different species of animal based on the frequencies?
Yeah, that was me.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, whoops.
Yeah, that was me. Through that was a very, we'll call it dumbed down instance of the antenna that I developed for my PhD research. Like to bring all that equipment out there would be a truckload in many days, and by then everything's scared off anyway. But yeah, so yeah, there was a little Hollywood with that, but the theory is correct. And again, nothing I saw was faked or planted. But yeah, it was interesting, and that's kind of what I like to base my research on, stuff like identifying frequency activity and what it's tied to.
Very cool. Yeah, forgive me. I was more intrigued by the science
no.
behind it, and I remembered you from the remote viewing, and I totally blanked out. There was a guy doing the experiment. That's all I knew.
That's fine. Everyone remembers remote viewing, and nobody remembers that one.
Well, okay, so then you can obviously explain more about like how that works. How did you develop the ability to be able to pinpoint different frequencies of different species? Like, was that like trial and error testing? How's that all work?
Well, so the Hollywood behind that one was I haven't yet identified certain frequencies. So it's very, very extremely difficult to pick up body signatures, we'll call it. You know, the human frequency. Like I can pick that up if you're right on top of the antenna. And then with some modifications to that range starts extending. What really happens is you have to lower the ambient noise of all, because there's thousands of frequencies just bouncing around everywhere. You know, the Earth's magnetic field and the core spinning is creating noise. You lower those down and you start to isolate things. And then what I had to do was start comparing, like via scientific research publications, people who had measured those frequencies said, okay, well, a brain of a gorilla or whatever operates at 7 hertz. And so I start creating lists and things like that. And then I started, scanning for them on the show. And then the valley thing was a little rough because the antenna is 2 ways. And behind us was a mountain. And then in front of us was the valley. Realistically, it was more likely coming from the valley kind of thing. So some of it, and it did lead to some findings. It could have been coming from behind us because it's a circle, and anything that can enter that circle is going to be picked up. So it could be coming from a very wide angle or straight ahead, straight behind, stuff like that.
Interesting. David has a question for you here. He would like to know, is the human frequency consistently the same?
From my research, no. People tend to have a frequency going on them between 5 and like 7 hertz from what I've seen. And that's everything from thoughts to the signals to your heart, to your muscles, all those electrical signals. 5 to 7. I haven't differentiated what makes one person 7, what makes one person 5 or 6 or anything like that. But they all tend to be in that block. And then there's a whole different thing. There's the amount of mass a person has, and does that make it stronger? Like if somebody was unknowingly riddled with cancer, all those extra cells are making more frequency, or maybe they've got a gigantic bacterial infection and the frequency and the heat that the bacteria is putting off, and all those kinds of things affect all of that. It's a really difficult, almost artistic scientific process, because we just don't know what type of energy live hair on your, for example, your beard is consuming, and how that affects the frequencies that your brain is passing up and down, versus maybe you've got a faster heart rate versus a slower heart rate, and all these things.
So how does a deer compare to a human? Are they completely far off, or any animal, whichever one you can talk about, I guess.
Yeah.
But like how like if a human is like 5 to 7, is a deer like 10, or something, or are they close enough that you could mistake them?
Well, mistake them, no, but so if I recall correctly, a deer is slightly higher, like we'll say 7 to 10. But here's where the trick comes in. So we're looking at frequencies like as if they're coming on to us, like hitting us in the face. It's just more or less like a line, it's hit us. But if you were to grab that frequency and turn it sideways, the frequency has a waveform. And so for humans, it might be going, a perfect sine wave up and down. And then for another animal, it might be going, da, 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 and then for another one, it's this way or that way, or there's, millions of possibilities, infinite possibilities. This is where the science comes in, of where you need bigger computers than what I have, to start identifying the patterns and trends, and automatically classifying them. So if you have a whole bunch of signals, you untangle them, and one's a perfect sine wave and one's jagged up and down, you could potentially say, well, that's a car and that's a deer, or that's a car and that's a human, or something like that.
So
think about it in 3D.
Because everything is grounded in financial and money and everything like that, what is the actual implication for this? Like, what is the use of what you've developed? Like, where is the funding? And not, I'm fabulously like excited for the technology, but somebody had to pay for it. So what is it supposed to be used for? Like,
So a lot of it was self-funded by me. I
okay.
did have some funding from the Department of Defense for a while. And in that lane, there's just infinite number of uses, from a passive sensor that you just set somewhere and start recording everything that's going by, like in the hostile area. And then all of a sudden you start to know the activity and patterns of life, to, on the commercial side, pointing it at, um, or even law enforcement pointing at someplace and saying, um, there is power on in that building that's 4 miles out in the desert, and there shouldn't be any power. Something's going on in there. Maybe it's a meth producing plant, or something like that. Like, there's just anything that you can get value out of, like geologically, before earthquakes happen. There's small things begin to, pressure builds in the crust, and there's changes that will change the waveform of that area. And so could we move the alert time for an earthquake down from 30 seconds up to, um, 5 minutes or a day, based on the likelihood and changes in pressure? Like, that's life saving. So that's kind of, even in my research, like setting this thing up on my deck, being able to see, minutes before lightning strikes, because you can tell in the in the area, you know, static is starting to build. There's like, okay, lightning is going to strike this way very soon, and then a couple minutes, boom, it hits. Um, so any type of those sensing applications, from geological to national security, has it's just, the problem is there's too much data and too many possibilities. And what's the best use in honing this in on?
Very cool. That's really cool. I actually just heard about the research they're doing off the coast somewhere, using the wire grid, the underwater grid out there, to try and use it for early detection of tsunamis and stuff coming in. So
Yeah, and it's super interesting, because, and it's just, anything moving that is a conductor on Earth is producing a frequency. Like, everything above 0 degrees Kelvin is producing a frequency. Um, uh, so all of this is out there. It's just a matter of getting refined enough to grab it and pull it and isolate it, analyze it. And like you have one commenter that said, honed AI and algorithms, like 100%, like that is absolutely like, um, this is not something, like as a person, I can spot a handful of things, but the brain power doesn't exist to sort through terabytes of information. A lot of it's all tangled together. Untangle it, reassemble it, and start, looking at it in different ways. That's, you know, salt water moving through, um, like antennas or wires, and that's producing something, and it's just a matter of capturing it.
Absolutely. David also would like to know, do you have a sweet range or an average for a Bigfoot?
I mean, just off, it's purely speculation. Like it's total guess, but if I recall correctly, it was about 9 hertz, 9 to 10 hertz.
Kind of like a big muscular human range.
Yeah, yeah. Like there's a whole lot of qualifying questions to that. Like one, are they real? Two, do they have the same signature as a human or a primate? And da 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 da. But if I had to speculate that,
I have to go with my other show for a minute here, but with your research, your remote viewing, and all that, what is your opinion on Bigfoot? Do you think they're out there? Do you?
uh,
we got,
it's hard. I'm a skeptic. I will not say no. I'm a skeptic. I'm very much. I will believe it when I see it. I'm not going to rule anything out, but I'm a skeptic.
You didn't have any weird experiences in that way while you were out with those guys?
There were plenty of weird experiences and noises and things, but there's a whole lot of other phenomena that could have been,
Mm,
and it's that are all also like, we'll say half of them are on the paranormal spectrum, and the other half are very valid, like known,
mhm.
squirrels and things. Um, Bigfoot is just the one that I'm probably the most skeptical on. Like I would be more likely to believe it was a spirit or something before I believed it was Bigfoot. But that's just me.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine. Everyone's got their opinions. I'm
Yep.
happy. All right. One more question here for you. Do you feel that certain frequencies have the power to heal?
Um, well, we know certain frequencies have the power to unheal or make sick.
Mhm.
So I'm going to say that yes, on some, there has to be something that does well for the body, especially since there are some that do very unwell. Um, so I just think it's a matter of where there's one, there's two kind of thing.
That's a very good point. You never thought of it that way.
Yeah.
So, so what I thought I read something just recently that now you're working with NASA or one of the space agencies. Is that right?
No,
Can
I've
you
I've kind
talk
of
about it?
thought about. Oh, so again, how deep do you want to go? So
Go
I
ahead.
did go through an astronaut program that is a private, um, uh, nonprofit education based, NASA, or not NASA, astronaut qualification program. So,
Okay.
and I'm on a list of people that could potentially be. Two of us have been called to go on various missions up to space. I'm on a list of that, and my research is very applicable to what they're studying. So it's likely. My long-term goal, if you put that aside, is I would like to put the sensor development, or the sensor that I'm developing, on a satellite and start sort of mapping what's going on and just seeing what's out there. Like, if we're looking down at Earth, seeing what all we can pick up.
Very cool. Lee would like to know, have you ever remote viewed a different planet? And if so, which ones?
I have not. The
Oh.
issue I have is getting a targeteer that, that can come up with things that are this creative. Like, yeah, I want to do all that kind of stuff, but I can't put it in an envelope myself
Mhm.
and view it. Um, so I guess I need to work a little. I haven't worked on it very hard at all, but I need to find someone as a targeteer that can put those, your standard practice targets, and then throw in some really good ones like Venus or whatever.
So you never had like anybody like not a practice or anything, but anyone ask you to do that specifically? Well, not necessarily specifically, but here's number one, target number one, go look at this for me. Like that's never ended up on a different planet.
No, never on a different planet. It has always been very tangible, like material. Like, where's my necklace? Where's my this thing?
That's very interesting. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's dive a little bit more into this. We got about 10 minutes left here. If anybody's got any questions, throw them in. When you're talking about remote viewing, and you kind of touched on this a little in the beginning as well. Is it possible to remote view, obviously, past events, but with your target, like let's say you're looking at Niagara Falls, can you remote view Niagara Falls within the picture time frame, or are you remote viewing it present day? Because I know you talked about this as well.
Yeah, I'm going to say it's possible. I There have been times when I've been remote viewing a target, and the picture is blue and daylight, and then but I've described it exactly as it is now, um, raining and overcast and dark, and vice versa. What I have found is the further you try to remote view ahead or back, um, the more room there is for error, and for you have to be very, very, very extremely specific. Like, um, like example I use a lot explaining is like if your target was the JFK assassination and you try to remote view that, you'll probably get some pretty good hits, but you don't know whether you've picked up on it from a family in middle of Wyoming that was watching it on TV, or you've picked it up from JFK himself's perspective, kind of thing. So you have to really start honing this down a lot and be very, very, very specific going forward or backward. Going backward, specificity is important from perspectives and things. Going forward, there's a lot of room for error because there's so many issues of free will and unknown and all these things that could happen. So you might be saying, however you want to put it, one of 10 different futures or something like that.
Is it kind of more like intent of the targeter or the person who gives it to you then? Or is it what you're picking up?
Intent of the viewer. So as a remote viewer, like what I said, intent wise is extremely critical.
Okay. So which is harder to view, like a place or a time, like Niagara Falls, or a like historical event, or like a lost object or something? What is the most challenging topic?
Um, from a strictly mechanical perspective, a lost object. A lot of lost objects are folded and tucked into something, and it's very dark where they are. So you get a lot of it's inside something green or something brown, or it's I don't know. It's folded. Um, Events tend to be pretty challenging, more of a again perspective thing. Um, uh, a specific target, very narrow, like Niagara Falls, Eiffel Tower, tend to be pretty easy.
Hmm. Lee would like to know, have you ever remote viewed a no place like Area 51, the Black Pyramid in Mount Denali?
I have not. I would like to. One thing I did remote view and we didn't realize is I remote viewed Taj Mahal. I didn't know what the target was, but I picked up on it like perfectly, described it for what it was. And then I was like, but there are tunnels underneath this place. And I don't know what but there are tunnels, a lot of tunnels going places. Um, and then as we researched into it, it turns out there's a big conspiracy theory about tunnels being under the Taj Mahal. And I clearly like there are tunnels. There's a way to get in this place that isn't the public way. And so that's my 2 cents on that. There's something there.
Very cool. Have you ever you talked about finding lost objects? Have you ever done like missing persons cases?
Not a firm case. I have found somebody that was missing and I needed them. So for for some personal history, I'm also in the Army Reserve, and at one point I was the commander of a unit, and I had a soldier that no showed to something, and I was like kind of in a panic, and so I started like in my own private office, like remote viewing, and I was like, wherever you find him, he's with his car. He's with his car. I can see the wheels. It's maybe parked, but he's with his car. And they found him like 10 minutes later, sleeping, taking a nap in his car. So that's pretty close to it.
Yeah, that counts, I guess. How about any hidden rooms under the Sphinx?
I have not remote viewed the Sphinx.
You got a lot of work to do, man. You got to get to, you got to get out there. You got to get to the Sphinx. You got to get to other planets. You got to get to all the no places.
Unfortunately, man, you get into this and all of a sudden everybody wants something. Like everything's like, where's my money? Where's my this? Where's my that? It's never like, let's go check out this really cool place kind of thing.
Very cool. Very cool. Is there anywhere that you, besides like some of the stuff that we've talked about, or maybe any of those, is there somewhere that you really want to remote view?
Pretty much all the no places.
Yeah.
I have a real bad desire to look at some of those places.
Very cool. Very cool. All right, guys, we got a little bit of time left here. If you have any questions, get them in the comments before we go. Again, people can reach out to you on Instagram. What's your Instagram handle for anybody listening?
Let me double check before I say that. Don't want to give them the wrong one. I don't remember it. I believe it's Christopher.Duncan. That's Duncan 9. Christopher.Duncan 9.
Awesome. Very cool. Very cool. Do you have any conventions or anything that you're going to be coming up speaking at, or any other appearances and stuff?
Nope. I am off the calendar for now. I have got a lot going on in my personal life, and so I've just kind of cleared my calendar out quite a bit.
Very cool. Very cool. We got one more question here for you. Looks like law of averages, 1 in 10 success rate when remote viewing is pretty incredible odds when tasked with a specific mission. I have no idea about remote viewing, but extremely interested. Okay, it's not a question, it's a comment. I'm sorry.
It's a very valid comment, though, because as a numbers person, amateur numbers person, it demonstrates over. I mean, you can, no matter what methodology you want to use, whether it's a linear regression of something or whatever, it is a statistical anomaly. Like, you should not be able to guess this much, even on a single remote viewing. Like, if I were to just put you on a spot right now, like remote view this, and that's it, the chances of you getting anything right, is about the same. It's a little bit better than just picking random words out of the dictionary to describe it, but it's not far off. But if you're getting at all close to it, and we'll call those like hits, that right there is enough to say, like, there's something to this. Like if you were to name 100 attributes and you got 50 of them in the ballpark of this thing, that's enough right there that there's something, there's an anomaly here. And that anomaly is either I have set this up and lied to the audience and you and I are in cahoots, or you've picked up on something. And I can assure you, we have not set anything up.
No. We had a hard enough time getting this scheduled.
Yeah.
Awesome. I lost my train of thought. What do you think is the reason why this works? Like, what are you tuning into that is allowing you to pick up on the randomness of whatever it is you're viewing?
Well, honestly, I don't know. If I had to just guess, I think that there's something about the whole Schrodinger's cat type thing. When something's been observed, it's kind of out there, if something's been observed, I think it is then observable. And there's some type of, whether it's a stream of consciousness or some even, theory of unity or something like that, there's something we tap into, universal knowledge, that kind of helps us pinpoint. I don't at all think that it's a matter of, well, I was blessed and you weren't, so I can do it. It's a matter of practice. It's a muscle, just like everything else. Some people are very, very, very good painters. Some people are not, but they all can pick up a paintbrush and get something out of it. And I think this is what this is.
Very cool. All right, I think this is going to be our last question here. Do you fear that the U.S. military operations could zero in on you remote viewing a no-go zone? Is this even a possibility?
My personal opinion is I don't think it's a possibility. I tend to not be on the side of people saying, that they're guarded or they're protected or blah, 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 because as a remote viewer, you don't go anywhere. You're very conscious right here. You're just sort of remotely perceiving. And as far as I was able to talk to people who were involved in the programs, the only real defense that they mentioned was throwing something very odd in the room. Like if you were remote viewing my bedroom and I were to put a helium balloon in the corner, that's way out of place. And as a remote viewer, you'd be more drawn to the helium balloon, like, what the hell? And that would kind of protect the room. I'm not afraid of it if it happens, but I just don't think that's possible. I'm way possible I'm wrong.
Well, let's hypothesize for a second. Like if you're using a stream of energy to connect to these different locations and stuff, but you're not connecting. Like let's use Area 51 as an example. If you're remote viewing Area 51, you're not, we'll say, physically remote viewing Area 51. You're viewing the target, which is Area 51. So then would your stream of consciousness energy be connected to the target or the actual Area 51?
That's a really good question. And that's very valid as far as detection and things.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like if I were broadcasting a signal, a radio signal, I can't tell if someone is on the other end receiving it unless they're sending something back saying, I got it.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of think that's how this is. As a passive receiver of information, not going anywhere, I'm getting what's already just out into the world, like there's no way to tell that I've grabbed that little bit of information and absorbed it and then sent it back on its way, kind of thing. So it's kind of, I don't know, that's the way I see it. And I think the proxy of viewing the target and then having like accuracy by proxy is also probably another degree of protection, kind of thing, like you said.
Kind of like if you post a picture on the internet, anybody can look at it. It becomes public knowledge then. So anybody can view that. But obviously on the internet, you can tell who's viewed it or trace things. But, it's basically,
Yep.
You can't tell who's seen your picture once it's out there. Yeah.
Yep.
Very interesting. Very interesting. All right, guys. We are at the end of our show for today. Thank you guys for watching. Thanks for all the questions. And most definitely thank you, Christopher. I appreciated it. I thoroughly enjoyed your class at Phenomicon and hearing you speak and stuff. So I look forward to seeing you again out there sometime and keeping in touch.
Yeah, likewise. I'm always available if you ever want to go again. So let me know. And then anyone, you can reach out on me on Instagram. I'm very easy to talk to. I don't turn people away, who want to say hi. So feel free.
Sounds good, man. I will get that in the show notes for the podcast and stuff as well then. And we will put that out there. So thank you so much, Christopher. You have a great day.
You too. Thanks for having me.
All right, guys, that is our show for this week. Coming up on Monday on Monsters on the Edge, if you're interested in all things cryptid and zoological, we have Rich Daniels is going to be joining us on Monday at noon on the Untold Radio Network here. He is going to be talking about the psychological effects of Bigfoot and other cryptid encounters on the human psyche. That's coming up on Monday. And then right here next week on the Paranormal Spectrum, we have Christopher Noel will be joining us. And he has a brand new book out on consciousness and aliens, and it's going to be a awesome show then as well. So I look forward to seeing you guys all again back then. And until next time, guys, remember, we're all part of the Paranormal Spectrum. Take care.
You seem to know